What's up, family? Thank you for tuning in to the DreamNation podcast. My name is Casanova. I'll be your host, and I'm excited to be bringing to you entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers from around the world. Stay locked in with us because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, Dream Nation? Today on the line, we are back in such a crazy time. No matter when you're listening to this, I guess if we're out of this and you're listening to it 3 months, 6 months later, just know that this is probably the heart of the pandemic that we've been going through. But today we have someone on the line that I'm excited for you to hear from because of the fact that he has still been crushing it both before the crisis and even through the crisis. And he's somebody that is a young gunner, I would say. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say, and I'm excited to learn from him, and I'm sure he's going to drop so many nuggets. So do me a favor and help me welcome to the show Mr. Jacob O'Connor. Jacob, you want to say what's up to Dream Nation?
Yo, what's up, Dream Nation? How you doing, Casanova?
Man, it's going to be really good. I'm excited. I know right now we're at a time in life right now where there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think for a lot of people, they don't know what this is like. What does that mean? Because they haven't really had to go through the tragedy and the triumph, right? Or the tragedy and then come out to the triumph. So now for people like you and I, though, who I think that we've experienced what it's like to start from the bottom, I think now we're able to really showcase what it was like prior and now be able to still talk to our audience, our tribe, our people, and tell them, hey, you're going to be okay. So I would say it's a crazy time, but I'm excited to have you on here. I'm excited to be able to pick your brain on a lot of things that's going on, especially in the podcasting world where you've been crushing it, the publications and everything else. So I always like to start by making sure we can give the proper introduction. So let me ask you this, even though you're a young gunner is how I like to call it, but before being featured in MSNBC and Yahoo and all these major publications and before having your podcast, before being able to build relationships with big influences in the world, take me back to when you were just a young boy and tell me, who is Jacob O'Connor?
I was and still am to an extent a basketball junkie. I was always in the gym before school, after school, anytime I could get in there, I was playing basketball. That was honestly, that sums up my entire childhood because everything connects back to basketball, whether I was watching Space Jam, I was at the park with friends, I was playing games. Basketball was my life prior to this whole entrepreneurship journey that I've gone on recently.
Got it. I love it. And so basketball, who's your favorite player?
Michael Jordan, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. You think LeBron will surpass it once he's done?
That's actually a conversation I like to stay away from because in my family, we get pretty heated about it.
Got it. That's all good. I mean, I'm not, for me, my favorite guy always growing up was AI, right? I was a little guy. So, I mean, he had the cornrows. I felt like he was pound for pound, the toughest man always on the court. So that was my guy. MJ obviously had his own lane, but AI was definitely my guy. So I love it. Now, talk to me about how did you get in the space of podcasting?
You want the long version or kind of the condensed version?
Well, talk to me about what was the first thing that attracted you to it. Let's start off there. Like, who introduced you to the world of podcasting?
Yeah. So I'll give like 10 seconds. I think this is really important of background. So my junior year in high school, I'm a senior right now. So my junior year of high school, I was selected to be in an elite entrepreneurial program called the Startup Program, where basically students were allowed to leave school for the first 2 hours of each day, and they would tour different businesses in the community. They would learn about businesses, and then they were tasked to start their own. And so at the end of the year, I ended up creating a product, and that product attracted the eye of a local company, and they offered me an internship. So it was while I was working this internship that I had a lot of downtime, and I started listening to podcasts. I ran out of music to listen to, and so I figured let's start checking out podcasting. Let's start to grow a little bit personally, and started listening to, it was either Joel Brown or Casey Adams. It was one of the two. But their podcast, Rise of the Young and Addicted to Success, absolutely captivated me. The fact they got to talk to all of these successful entrepreneurs, high performers, professional athletes, I loved it. And I thought to myself, why can't I do that? And sitting here, I think 8 months later or so, I am doing it. I have done it. I've interviewed both those hosts. It's been fantastic.
Man, I love it. And I had the pleasure of obviously being connected and doing your show, and you did great at that. But that's a lot of, I guess, what's the word that I'm looking for? That's a lot of, for lack of a better term, cojones, right? To be able to feel like at 17 years old, being a junior in high school, that you could go out and you can interview some of the world's biggest names, right? That are crushing it in a medium that is really taking off. Like, were you always that type of a kid?
I've always been a go-getter and kind of like set my eyes on bigger things, but I'm going to be very honest. The confidence was not there at all in the beginning. If you go back, I always tell people, if you're going to listen to my podcast, don't listen to the first 10 episodes. Go back to those later, because I am shaky voice, very nervous, very and tripping over my words. This confidence is something that has recently came my way.
God, and what I love about that is if somebody's listening right now and they're wondering, that means that you just have to start, because it's always going to be ugly when you start. And for us, charting into unknowing territories, right? When we're charting those types of waters, like, it's very, very tough to think that people want to hear what you have to say, that people want to be interviewed by you of all people, when everybody's out there trying to get their time, right? But the fact that you still just started, I love that. And now you say, I gained confidence. So it's really just like batting practice, or even, shooting shots in the gym, right? Those first couple, when you throw up that three ball, it's going to look ugly. But then after a while, when you've seen the pressure, now you don't get hyped for the moment. And like I always say, start to backpedal afterwards. So was anybody else in your immediate circle doing any type of podcasting when you first got started?
No, it was really just me.
So how did you learn, like, what was needed? How did you learn about the equipment? How did you learn about where to host your podcast? What did all that look like?
Okay, this is a great question, because recently I've had a lot of people DMing me asking about the process of starting a podcast. It was very challenging for myself because I'm not technologically minded, but I think I can say here pretty easily the steps to go about it. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to want to go check out Pat Flynn on YouTube. He has all of the videos for the equipment that you need, how to set stuff up affordably, and the different host sites and stuff to use. I actually got to interview him yesterday, which was super cool, because in a way he helped me start my podcast. And so to sit down and pick his brain yesterday was fantastic. But back to the point. So I use Libsyn for my host site. It's very affordable. They had different packages, like $5 a month, $10, all the way up to $30 a month. And so you're able to start off relatively cheap by just doing the $5 a month package. And then you just need, I use a Blue Yeti mic. It's like $100. Your total overhead is probably going to be like $150 with a couple recurring monthly expenses. So podcasting is actually a super affordable space to get into.
And why do you think that podcasting is ramping up so fast right now? Like, because I think I heard the stat, which was there is over 60 million blogs, and then there's like 30 million YouTube channels, but there's only like less than 1 million podcasts, which is crazy.
Yes.
So why do you think that, like, but podcasting is ramping up faster from what I've heard and read than those other two platforms did? So what do you think is a valuable reason that most people is getting into podcasting?
Yeah, I love the fact you pulled those statistics. I look over those too. Like, that is something that it's super intriguing to see, because YouTube now, you see so many people making money off YouTube and, funding their lifestyle. And now you look over to podcasting and you see people like Joe Rogan making literally like $750,000 to $1 million per episode. Right. And you're thinking, like, how can they do this? And the reason is because podcasting is such, in a way, it's better than YouTube, because you're able to more passively pay attention to it. With YouTube, you have to be watching the video, or if you don't have premium, you have to listen to the ads and everything like that. And so you can't even like shut off your phone, go for a run, something like that, and listen to a YouTube video. But with podcasts, they're so readily available. They're free. You click it, you download it, you listen to it. You can hear all these different stories, all these different success stories, comedies, horror stories, anything you're interested in. And it's free. It's right there. It's readily available.
I love it. I love it. And it helps you in whatever your niche is. It helps you to gain authority relatively quickly, right? Because for a lot of people, they don't get started with gaining authority, because with the YouTube video, you still need the right lighting, right? You need to have the right microphone. There's all these other things. There's so many more components. And then so I feel like with podcasting, you don't have all of those barriers. You can record it right there from your phone. Even sometimes in the middle of a run, you just stop. You're like, hey guys, here's what I want wanted to let you know I'm on this run. So I love that you said that. For you, who was your first, like, well, okay, you decided you wanted to start this podcast. Now you know the equipment. How did you go out and get your first guest? Was it a friend, a local family or friend, or what did that look like?
I've always shot pretty big with this. So no, it was not that. That would have been the easier route, in my opinion. What I did instead was I looked through Instagram, and I was thinking all these cool people who've proven that they have been successful in their life. They're sharing their stories. I can see it all online. I'm going to start sending out DMs to all of these people. And one of the reasons my podcast has been so successful is because of the caliber of guests that I've been able to get on. The people that I've been able to connect with is something that you don't typically see in someone my age. Not trying to talk myself up or anything, but I've had so many people tell me, like, how did you connect with these people? I ended up doing an episode on it. It's when it comes out to it, it comes out to persistence and consistency. I think I looked back and counted one day. I'd sent probably 120 DMs to get those first couple interviews. So I did all of it through Instagram, and my conversion rate was like 2% of people that would actually respond and then actually come on the show. So it was just a matter of persistence and consistency.
I love it. Who was the first person that said yeah for you? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Emil Steenveld. It was the night before my 18th birthday. So I remember being super excited about having my first interview with a 17-year-old.
Got it. I love it. And so he agreed to come on. How long afterward did he agree to come on? Was it like, yeah, let's do it tomorrow? Was it like, hit me up, we can do it next month?
I'm trying to think. So Emil Steenveld is roommates with Joel Brown. They live together. They run the Addicted to Success stuff together. And so I've been checking out Joel Brown's stuff. And then that's how I came across Emil. And I think it might have been like a week or two. I actually had to take like a screening phone call with him because originally, like, he didn't want to waste his time, which I understand in retrospect. Like, you got to be careful about your time. And he was considering charging me. And I probably would have found a way to come up with the money. But he did a screening call with me, and he ended up not charging me because he said that my passion and my drive was something that he had not seen in a lot of kids my age. And he wanted to have the honor of being the first person to take a chance on me.
Man, I love that. And the fact that something that I want people to make sure that they take note of is he said, I probably would have found a way to come up with the money either way, right? It's like if there's an opportunity out there and there's a will, there's a way, you're going to make it work. So I love that you said that. Now, let me ask, just on ninja strategy and you being transparent, was your end goal to really be able to get Joel Brown, but he was just so much bigger that then you went after Emil, or was your goal to actually get Emil?
So sometimes that is the route that you got to take, but you got to be careful when you do that because you don't want to come across as you're just using someone. So before, I made sure that I found value in Emil. I made sure that he knew that, like, yes, I'm absolutely like interested in him, to the point where whenever I asked later, it wasn't like, hey, I was just using you. It was like, okay, now that we've connected and formed a relationship, I feel comfortable and you feel comfortable for me to ask you to make an introduction to Joel.
Man, I love that. I love it. Find the value first. Make sure that they still align with what your message is, and you'll be able to then build a solid relationship that at the end of the day, that can bring you so many more guests or opportunities that you would have never been afforded before. So have you started, because a lot of people get in, did you get in, if you're being honest, did you get in because you wanted to make money from your podcast, or did you get in because you wanted to tell a story?
I think that there's almost a third option, and that would be the experience that you get from the podcast. So yes, money is always in the back of your mind. I would like to say I'm a business person. So yes, I've always thought about monetizing, and one day I will, but that's not the sole intention of why I did it. Myself, I know that I have a story, but it wasn't my story that I was looking to share. It was other people's stories that I wanted to share. And so what I really got into it for was the experience. I wanted to be traveling the world, interviewing these people. I wanted to end up speaking on stages. I wanted to be a public speaker. And these are all still goals that I have. And I just saw podcasting as being the first step in that larger vision.
Man, I love it. And at 17 to be who was like a mentor for you, or like, how did you start to come up with this mindset? Like, were your parents entrepreneurs, or were they big thought leaders? Like, where did you come up with that to be able to know that, hey, here's my vision and here's how I'm going to tackle step A, step B, step C, and so forth?
My parents are both very hard workers, but I would actually credit this to YouTube. So YouTube, I got into the fact that I love basketball. So I would watch these basketball videos on YouTube, and they would have these speakers in the background, like hyping everyone up. They're motivational speakers.
Yeah.
And I eventually would end up Googling these guys and listening to their content. And that would then lead to people like Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins. And so I became really big fans of the stuff that they were sharing. I started to retain a lot of their information, and they started to slowly, without me even realizing it, shift my mindset from one of like the typical from everyone else to a place of abundance, to a place of why not try this?
Man, that's crazy. At 17 to be able, and were any of your other friends or anybody else on the same path of this journey after you had gotten started? Because obviously everybody's into sports for the most part. It's easy to go talk about what happened in the NBA last night. But now if you come to someone, especially at the age of 17, and you're saying like, oh, here's what I just learned from Bob Proctor, like was there acceptance of it, or was it kind of like you started to be alienated?
I didn't actually really share it because I always had this conception that like it was weird to be that self-aware, and so I would kind of keep it to myself actually. But as time's progressed and as like the circle changes, I have been able to share my thoughts and the stuff that I've learned with a couple close friends. And yes, the group's not as big as it used to be, but that doesn't matter because the group is tight knit now of like-minded people.
Got it. I love it. I love it. What's been your biggest challenge that you wish you would have known in starting your podcast, like that now and you've overcome? But what's been your biggest challenge?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to say this might not even be something that I wish I would have known in the beginning, but in terms of biggest challenge, it would be getting the confidence when you're behind the mic every time, because you can clearly hear it in those first 10, 20 episodes. I'm super shaky. And it's probably within the last 15 to 20 episodes where I'm sitting there thinking like, I'm confident. Like my big win yesterday was I came out of that interview with Pat Flynn. And by no means am I saying I'm on the same level as Pat Flynn, but I came out saying like, I feel like I was able to keep this conversation in a very educated way. And at the same time, I sounded super confident. I had this issue of getting these big people on, and I would be sitting here sweating. I'd be super nervous. And yesterday I came out of it and I was like that felt good. Like it felt like it was just two friends just talking about something.
Right. I love it. For anybody who doesn't know, Pat Flynn is especially in the podcasting world, but I would even argue to say in the business space, Pat Flynn is definitely somebody that you'll want to look at. He's been a pioneer for the last probably 10 years or so, smart passive income. I learned a lot for getting my podcast started, this podcast from Pat Flynn as well. And so that's super, super dope. What's one goal that you hope to achieve by the end of the year with your podcast?
Oh, here we go. Speak on stage, public speaking at events. And actually, funny story with this. I was writing my goals down. I think it was maybe in January. I was writing my goals for 2020. I was a little bit late. It was the end of January, but I was still writing them down. And I had two of them. One was to go to California and one was to go to New York. I wanted to speak at public events and interview people in both states. And that same day, I got a phone call from someone who had awarded me a grant that I won for the podcast to help fund everything. And I got a call from him asking me if I wanted to fly out to New York to speak at their donor event. So that right there was crazy because I just written down that day that was one of my goals. And then I get this phone call, and it was absolutely crazy to have heard that.
Wow. Now that's something that's very interesting and you dropped. And I know a lot of people's minds right now are listening to this and they're saying, what? You got awarded a grant for your funding of your podcast. How did that come about?
Yeah. So back to the program that I was in last year, they were always, my teacher, well, actually we didn't have a teacher. What we had was, what was the word they used? Facilitator, because in that class it was student led. So we just had someone there to give us kind of the guidelines. And she would send us emails for different opportunities to help fund all of our different ventures that we were working on through the class. One of them was the Hunter Watson Fund, which gives out grants to help people with different ventures that they're working on. And so I applied last year. I didn't win, but I remember this year and I applied this year and I ended up winning that grant.
Wow. Got it. And how much was the grant for?
It's for $5,000, I believe.
Got it. And how much for somebody that's listening right now, they were like, okay, well, did you use all of that for your podcast? Like, did you use how much of that did you use for your actual podcast and getting things set up and off of the ground?
I actually won the grant like 2 months ago. So I had everything already set up. I just use it now for upgrading equipment, advertising expenses. I'm coming out with an Instagram advertisement commercial I'll be releasing soon. So stuff like that.
Got it. So you're using it to scale up. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. Absolutely love it. So for anybody that's thinking right now that they want to get a podcast up and going, what's that one piece of advice that you would give them?
Make sure the topic that you pick is something that you're interested in and you're going to be able to talk about and do interviews with when you're not even like interested in that moment. So what I mean by that is I played basketball this year. I'm a varsity basketball player and I still kept my Monday, Wednesday, Friday episode schedule. And there was times where I'd get back from a game at 10 or 11. I would take an interview with someone in a different country at like 11:30 and I'd have that out the next morning. So all I want to do is go to bed because I'm taking these AP classes. I got all that homework I still got to do. But I was able to force myself to sit down, do the interviews, edit it, get it out the next day. And that's not something you can do if you pick a topic that you think will make money, but you're not actually that interested in.
Got it. I love that. I love that because there's going to be times where you don't feel like recording, where you don't feel like talking to anybody, and where you're just stuck on content. But if you are not already reading about the content, eating, sleeping, living, whatever that specific topic is, just like you said, it's going to be very tough for you to continuously record value content on your podcast. So that's a great point. And something that I'll be honest, I probably never thought about in the beginning. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to just talk to people. But you do want to be a little bit more focused on that because for a lot of people, especially if you are not considering yourself as an extroverted person where you can just go out and have conversation, it makes it a lot tougher. Whereas if you are a lot more streamlined and focused, I think you'll be good. Who's been a guest for you that you never thought you would have gotten that you got?
If I'm being honest, there's probably like 10 of them from people like Pat Flynn, obviously, who I mentioned recently.
Why did you never think you'd get Pat?
Because of the fact that his podcast is so big and he's got so many different people. He told me alone that he had 200 interview requests come in last month. And so just the fact that, I was one of them that was picked was something that was very surprising to me. So people like Pat Flynn, David Meltzer, I recently got a yes from Andy Frisella, Sean Whalen, a lot of these big entrepreneurs that have been super successful. I was kind of hesitant at first, but I was still willing to reach out and be consistent with it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you are persistent and consistent and you're on top of it. I mean, not a lot of people, I do a lot of podcast request interviews as well. And the fact that even this morning you were like, hey, just excited for today's pod. Like those are the little things that can make somebody not forget about your call or can make you just really build a relationship. So I appreciate you doing that. Now, here's what I want to ask for anybody that is still thinking that, look, man, I'm very inspired. He's still in high school. He's crushing it. Now he's won grants and everything else. But they have this little voice inside of their head and they're wondering, if they're smart enough, if they're strong enough, or even if they have enough resources. What's one thing that you tell that person to get them to just take action?
That would be probably just to make the decision to do it, because when you make a decision, like it's going to sound super like metaphysical. When you start to think about it, like your brain starts to find ways to make things happen. It starts to kind of manifest into reality. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I would challenge them to think about it this way. Let's take all resources aside. Let's sit there and let's say you have unlimited money and you're as happy as you can be in life. You have all the money you could possibly need to fund this. Would you still do it? And if your answer is yes, then just start working from there, because you already have the decision made and now things are going to start coming into your life because of the fact that you take action, and action creates momentum. More momentum you have, the more things that come into reality and fruition. So that'd be my one piece of advice I'd offer, is to just look at it with that perspective of, if I had all the money I needed, would I still do it? And then make the decision.
Got it. Love it. For anybody that wants to stay in touch with you, where can they find you at?
I've got the podcast, of course, Venture Mentality. It's on iTunes, Spotify, it's everywhere. Instagram, people should connect to me on Instagram, probably where I'm most active, venture.mentality. Send me a DM, tag me in your story. I love hearing from everyone who's heard me.
Man, we love that. Well, we can't wait to have you on again. This has been a phenomenal episode. You've crushed it. I'm sure there's going to be more people that are now getting into the podcasting space just because they heard you, and hopefully more people that are going to reach out and be able to tell you how much you've been an inspiration to them thus far. So thanks again, man. It's been phenomenal. And remember, in the dream we trust. Let's go. That's the episode for today. Let me know if you got any value out of this, if you liked anything about it. Reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, any of the social media networks. And of course, leave me a review, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're hearing this at. I would love to have a review to show, what you're getting out of this. Is there anything that I could do better? Is there any way that I can add more value to you? So hopefully you all take some action today. That's my show. I love you all. Be great. But remember, we must take action.